Hello brothers, and welcome back to Drunk Monkey. This is Shane. Today I'd like to introduce you to a very special friend of mine, a very dear friend. His name's Will Masters. And if you are one of my Lumen brothers, he was initiated with us out at Ghost Ranch, and if you're one of my 12-step brothers up in Oklahoma, this is the gentleman I talked about that overcame the pretty significant circumstances. But Will has been, for a number of years now, my confidant and a comrade on this spiritual quest. And his story has had a very powerful effect in my life, and so I want to share it in hopes that it has a powerful effect in your life, even just hearing a 30-minute synopsis. But essentially what Will did was he moved from a place of physical paralysis under really tremendous circumstances to a place of recovery and health and joy, and he did it primarily through a belief and through a practice. And by witnessing that practice and that recovery, it was a major inspiration in my life. And as I watched his story unfold and I watched his healing taking place, I started to pay more attention and do a little more research about what was happening. And so I strongly encourage you to look into doctors like Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza. But Bruce Lipton has this talk called The Biology of Belief, and that'll give you kind of a basis of understanding for how this miraculous healing took place in Will's life. So now I invite you to sit up straight, get comfortable, take a deep breath in, exhale slowly and relax, and let's be totally present right here in this moment as we meet Mr. Will Masters. Welcome to the first interview ever in the Yoga Yurt studio at Sacred River Retreat. I'm Shane, and today I've invited in Mr. Will Masters.
Hello, Shane. It's good to be here.
I've already told people a little bit about you and a little bit about your story, but just sort of the highlights and the ultimate result of what you did. So I wanted to kind of share the story, especially for folks who haven't heard it yet. And so I like to go back wherever you want to start with the event that brought you here.
All right, great. Well, I guess probably the beginning point, July 2017, I'm on a 10-day Vipassana course, and it's day one, and I'm returning to my dormitory room. The day's gone pretty well, and suddenly I had a horrendous pain in my lower back, and that night just kept thinking if I could stay in the present moment, flow with the breath. This is just a big sankara coming through. Everything's going to be all right. But it wasn't all right. And by the next morning, I had management call an ambulance, and came to find out that due to an outpatient, it was an outpatient procedure I'd had done 5 days earlier, where they put a little endoscope down into my esophagus. Well, apparently something wasn't cleaned properly because I got a staph bacteria, and the staph bacteria had gone down, and it was a major event in that the bacteria had eaten quite a bit of the bone and the nerve in my sacral area. I'd had challenges in my sacral area pretty much my whole life. Meditating for long periods of time was always challenging for me. And so it was so severe. I was in so much pain, excruciating pain 24/7. And at that point, it was hard for me to imagine how a person could be in so much pain and not pass out. The injury was such that I was initially paralyzed, the lower extremities. There was a lot of swelling, and moment to moment, what I began to discover was this awareness of being more than my body, more than my thoughts, to be in the present moment by observing my breath rather than trying to check out, going either further into observing my body sensations. And so this being present, being here now became a very real anchor for me. Actually, the only refuge I could find, because the moment I started thinking about what's going to happen in the future, or what had just happened, or what had happened in the past, I was immediately thrown back into chaos and extreme amount of pain. So it became probably the most intense, long-lived Vipassana experience I've ever had. And I think there's still a very large part of it that's happening now, years later. But this was July 2017. By September 2017, I had gone from paralyzed to being able to move, create movement, generate movement, flowing with the breath, little micro yoga, just really staying in my heart, strong coherent heartbeat, learning how to be in this space of generating love and joy and synchronicity from the inside out. And this process that I went through helped me become more aware of how to tune into my inner body and to trust natural process of my breath, and to tune into the rhythm of my heart and this little dance that my heartbeat and my breath do. I could come into a natural place of tuning in where I could open myself wide enough to allow it to flow through. And that's when I began this process of regenerating nerve, regenerating bone, kind of like Dr. Joe Dispenza, imagining my perfect etheric template for what could happen in my sacral area, days to weeks to months to, I think it was probably a couple years later, I went from this place of paralyzed to moving to walker to walking to now. Now my sacral area is more aligned and integrated than before the major spinal cord injury, and little to no uncomfortableness in my lower back. I had never experienced that before. I think what came back together is more perfect for me than the way that it was before. And really what I attribute, there were so many healing modalities that I went through. The main healing modality was this place of letting go of fear, coming into love, and flowing with my breath and natural heartbeat, allowing joy to naturally flow through and create the healing space physically, mentally, spiritually, throughout my being. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
When you called me, when you were at the hospital here in Seguin, that was probably what, like 2 weeks after it happened, or a week?
That would have been, yes, that would have been right about 2 weeks into it.
And you called me and you told me, I think the diagnosis was that you had, the bacteria had actually eaten away at the spinal column in the sacral area, right?
Right.
I think you said you had a 1 in 100 chance, was what the doctor told you, of walking again?
Yeah, the doctor had looked at the x-rays and the MRIs and all the test results and said, you know, all medical terminology aside, he said, your lower back is really fucked up.
Yeah.
That's basically, I mean, that's exactly what he told me. He said, but I give you probably about a 1 in 100 chance of ever walking again.
And that was because the nerve tissue was gone?
Right.
And so there's no communication to the legs. Could you feel anything in your legs at all at that time?
It was swollen. They were swollen. There was a lot of pain. I think there was still a certain amount of nerve that was intact. I don't think it was entirely severed, but I think it was pretty major. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't there. It took me a long time. Just, you know, I was finally able to begin to wiggle my toes after weeks into it.
Okay.
And slowly the movement came back.
When I came in to see you the first time, you know, you told me all of what was going on here, And then you had this big ridiculous smile on your face, and you were almost like delighted, and you almost seemed like happy to be given this time, this opportunity to sit and focus on meditation.
Yes.
And you kept expressing all the gratitude for the people that were running your real estate brokerage, the people and their healing energy, and the loving energy of the nurses and the doctor, and the fact that I was there. And it almost felt like you were having a celebration of sorts.
Yes.
Which was kind of nonsense to me, because many years ago, I severed a nerve on my finger, my little ring finger, and I remember the neurologist told me, peripheral nerves grow back sometimes. It's not totally reliable, but central nerves don't really grow back. So when you were telling me all this, and you were just seeming so happy, and I just kept hearing that doctor that I heard years ago that was telling me that basically this was not going to work for you, and so I had that belief system that it was not, you were just kind of living in this strange fantasy land, like an escapism or something, is kind of what it looked like from my perspective back then.
Sure.
This is, 2.5 years ago or so?
Yes.
And I remember just being very perplexed by the whole thing. And I thought you were a little kooky, but I was hopeful. But there was something in the hug that I got from you at the end. And it's almost like I felt a rush of energy of healing. Like I could feel healing happening. It's kind of hard to describe it. I came home and I talked to April about it, and I was like, it's just really strange. But it just, there was a belief in the air, is all I could say. And now, fast forward a little bit, you say you started using the walker. I remember we had a second story yoga studio, and you were a regular customer before this happened. And then of course you disappeared for a long time, and then I heard a noise one day and you came up on the walker. So if you'll remember, in those early days of coming back to yoga on the second floor, and you were barely moving at all, how much pain were you in at that point?
I was still in a considerable amount of pain. I remember thinking before I returned for the first time, am I going to make it up the stairs, without literally having to be carried up the stairs? I remember feeling so excited, and I remember getting help with carrying the walker up, but somehow or the other I made it up the flight of stairs. But I was still in quite a bit of pain. It was my right foot was still fairly immobile. At that point, I don't remember if I could hold a standing pose or not. But I was doing, by then I had learned a lot of humility, and I also had a certain amount of wisdom about doing what I could do and being thankful for that. Mm-hmm. And so while others were doing standing poses, I was like on my hands and knees doing what I could do, mm-hmm. and it felt really good.
Yeah. I don't remember that. I remember teaching a class and everybody's standing up, and of course, at least a third of the class is going to be on your feet. And I remember looking and seeing you down the ground going, there's just no way I can teach around this. This gentleman clearly has to figure out his own capabilities and limitations. So it was a humbling lesson for me to recognize, you can't possibly understand what everybody's going through. You simply have to give them space for it. There were two things I remember that were the major issues with this recovery. And as I recall, doctors gave you a solution to one of those and no solution to the other. And the first was the bacteria needed to die.
Right.
And so they gave you medication for that. And then you did your own personal research and found that the hyperbaric chamber makes a very hostile environment and they can't survive in that area.
Right.
But as far as nerve tissue regenerating, fixing the nerve tissue, did they offer you any sort of solution for that?
No, and they said that even though it was highly unlikely that within a 2-year period of time I would probably know how much, if any, that I would recover of, from what I used to be able to do. And it's interesting, I think a part of how the energy works is the more we need it, the more powerful it becomes. And so I was getting a very strong flow, and I could feel the connections taking place. So it was about 250, 300 hours of hyperbaric oxygen therapy that I went through. Within that environment, it helped make sure that the bacteria wasn't there anymore, but it also gave me opportunity to energize that etheric template of my physical body. And there was a lot of reintegration that went on spiritually as well. So as I mentioned earlier, I think for a lot of people in day-to-day, if it's, if life's going relatively well, probably isn't going to be a lot of motivation to go this intensely into meditation and regeneration. However, I'm so thankful for the opportunity, because even if I were still in a wheelchair today, I'd have this joy. There's a connection, and it never leaves. It's way beyond my own ego or concerns about my past or my future. It's just here, present.
Speaking of the meditation in the chamber, so when they put you in the hyperbaric chamber, I remember you mentioned that there was a TV available to you, and of course that would have just been mind numbing, and you told them immediately to turn that off.
Yes.
So you said 200 to 300 hours, or how many hours?
Yeah, it was about 250, 300 hours. So it was an hour and a half every time I went in. I was going in 3 times a week. Then I kept bringing the experience more into the present moment. It's like, can I do this brushing my teeth, or before I go to bed at night, or when I wake up in the morning? This tuning in. It's like tuning in a radio station. It's like this frequency vibration of love and joy and bliss. It's like, am I willing to be this happy? Beyond the circumstances, beyond what I think is happening in my life, I am really happy on the inside. It's just like, oh my gosh. I am just like, okay, yeah, something can happen, and it can, like, really, this is really, really bad, or this really, really hurts, or this is so sad. And at the same time, the flow doesn't stop. I'm still in this state of joy, or at least I can choose it anytime that I want. And I feel like it's available for all of us all the time.
The joy thing.
Yes.
It's a ridiculous amount of joy. It's a ridiculous place to put your joy.
Yes.
You're in the middle of a 1 in 100 chance of ever walking again. You're a real estate broker, which a lot of that's going to be on your feet. At the time, so here's another thing. Some people might look at your situation and say, well, of course a guy can just sort of step out of life. We're all having to do that right now. Step out of life for a minute and deal with this major health crisis. And in that isolation, maybe it's easy to find joy. But real life didn't stop for you at that time. And there was a couple of things that were happening in your life. But you had a couple of lawsuits going on. You had a hospital bill that came in. Can you talk about those things that are happening while you're finding all this joy in your recovery?
Oh yeah. So if we were really taking a look at full real life scenario of it, it was like perfect storm in my life, because it was the most horrendous physical injury I'd ever had. It was excruciating pain. I mean, when I got discharged from the hospital, the doctor said 3 things to me. He said, first of all, don't try to explain to anyone how much pain you've been in, because they're not going to comprehend it. And he said, second of all, you're the weakest you've ever been in your whole life, which at that time I really didn't realize. I mean, I'd been through 8 weeks of bedridden. The antibiotics had really kicked my butt. But I still had this joy flowing through me, and I thought, everything's possible. And then he said, and go see a therapist, because, I guess he could kind of tell that, there was still this disconnect between or in his impression, a disconnect in between my attitude and joy in life and what my apparent situation was physically. But at the same time, yeah, there were other challenges going on in my life. I mean, I was trying to rehab this house, major issues with contractors, lawsuit, another lawsuit, trying to sell the ranch. It was, I was getting hit from all directions. I was being bankrupted physically. I had relationship issues going on with my significant other. There were things going on that were so much of a, I was basically at this point of not only losing everything, but being told that basically I'm in so much pain I shouldn't even try to explain to anyone how much pain I'm in. I'm the weakest I've been in my whole life, and I should really go see a therapist. So yeah, that kind of sums it up.
And you may never walk again.
I mean, yeah, well, I wanted a 100 chance, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was.
So you're saying
that was
there's
kind
a
of like
chance.
on par with the situation at the moment.
Yeah, so, and of course, I didn't have visibility on all those things that were happening back when I thought you were already being ridiculously joyful. So it's over this past 2.5 years of watching you go through this whole process and now understanding the full picture of the tremendous pressures that you were under. And it would be real easy to just look at somebody's life and say, man, that guy, poor guy, you know, single dude, you know, is just not walking, his business is gonna collapse. It really, you could look at it either way. You could look at it as a big disaster, but you were right in the middle of the disaster and still just completely finding all those elements that you could celebrate and be happy about. And you just kept taking another step, if even you couldn't take a step, but whatever the next thing was, you were relentless. You were more relentless than the bacteria. You were more relentless than the bill seekers. You were more relentless than the lawsuit. And what you were not relenting was your inner peace.
Yes.
And so what is your number one, if you could talk to anybody who's just struggling, because you know this seems to be the major issue in everyone's life, is thinking about the struggle, thinking about how awful it might be or it's going to be, and we end up getting more sickness, more paralysis, because we're just so concerned about it. So in the middle of all of that, you may never walk, you may lose your business, you may lose your finances. What was it that was a key factor in helping you just say, I'm gonna let it go, I'm gonna surrender, and just find joy in the middle of this?
Well, you know, before the major spinal cord injury, I was already on a path of seeking inner awareness, and part of that involved getting out of my head, my thinking, and more into my body. And as I came more into my body, I began to realize what a gift my heart is and breath. And so I would say to anyone who asked me, of all the modalities that have brought me back to this place of health, and by the way, today I can run. I've been teaching 9 yoga classes a week. I can do headstands on my paddleboard. I'm about to turn 62 years old. And it's the joy in my heart that I get excited about. And this joy in my heart is like, I encourage everyone I meet, begin right now and keep it simple. Don't wait. Begin to tune what's happening on the inside. Begin to find inner peace, inner joy in whatever modality, methodology, technique wakes you up and brightens up your day. Find whichever ways. There are so many opportunities. We're in such a place right now with our social distancing. I like to call that physical distancing. We can still connect socially, but with our being safe with the virus. But with this place of, okay, so like now to have some more, for a lot of people, not for everyone, there are frontline workers who are busier now than ever, There are others who are at home with family or home by themselves, and there's this place of coming into hermitage, this place of coming into a quiet space, at least being able to create a little bit more time. I can tell you, every moment that you're willing to spend developing inner peace will exponentially empower you to be more alert and equanimous in your day-to-day life. Something as simple as paying attention to your breath and to being with your body in such a way that you're creating a place of compassion and inner comfort will bring this natural sunshine, smile throughout your being. I mean, right now, if you're not smiling, just bring the corners of your mouth up for a moment and feel what that feels like. Is that little energy, that little shift that happens when you begin to smile, that you can feel a little shift in your emotion, your body chemistry, electromagnetic field. It's this energy it can be so empowering. It's this little spark that can light up from the inside out. The breath can calm your mind and comfort your body. Strong, coherent heartbeat can give you courage and strength to step forward. This is what I share with others, because when I wake up in the morning, I still have a choice. I mean, I don't have to be encouraging. I don't have to choose joy. It's actually still day to day. Is this who I am and what I want to be and where I'm flowing at the moment?
I want to discuss this concept that you and I have been talking about, which is the impeccable heart.
Yes.
And I know that we just barely even began to sort of unfold what we even collectively mean by this idea of the impeccable heart. You know,
yes.
In applying impeccability in the physical and in the metaphysical sense.
Yes, well, the impeccable heart, another reference, the Institute of Heart Math. The Institute of Heart Math has a lot of study on the benefits of generating a coherent heartbeat. And along with this comes this opportunity. When I generate a coherent heartbeat and come into your field, there's a harmonic resonance that takes place. And when you're also generating a strong, coherent heartbeat, then our two heartbeats come together and strengthen the resonance. And I believe that this particular dynamic isn't limited to physical space. And so in terms of the impeccable heart, we can call each other forth to come into this place of coherence and stability and strength. And there is this opportunity as a human being to radiate this powerful healing energy in this moment and in this moment and in this moment, with this breath, in each breath.
Yeah, I think your story is compelling, and when I share it, I see people sort of like in the middle of like disbelief and like, oh my God, it really is possible. So I think that just in sharing your story, however it happened, even if you just had a broken bone in your back and you recovered from that with your mind, but you had nerve tissue that you regenerated, and you did it in the midst of a shitstorm of life.
Yeah,
and what a tremendous story to be sharing with people.
Yeah.
I thank you.
I'll share this little piece with you. The learning never stops. And I can tell you that I am probably as, if not more, challenged now than I was then. Because what I realize when I look back over the last 6 to 8 months of being happy and healthy and resolving some of the stuff that, was hard to resolve, and not that life still doesn't have its challenges, but when I went from a place of huge pressure and challenge to a place of relatively less pressure and challenge, staying in impeccable heart actually becomes more challenging.
Yeah.
It's an ironic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm in this place of remembering, and you're helping me with that, and I really appreciate your help with that, of how precious every moment is, And there's like equally as challenging and huge steps to take. And so it's like, be prepared, keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing.
Keeping the edges hot is voluntary until you fall into the fire.
Absolutely. Well said.
All right, with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Will. I appreciate you being here. Namaste.
Namaste.